welcome to First Geek Congregation. If you were watching last week or you were here last week, we talked about In the Beginning, which was kind of an audit of various religions and their views on creation, which, oddly enough, people here, no, they didn't see it. The people that were here aren't here today, so we seem to have, mixed people in and out. Just the weirdness of this place. But if you were watching online and you saw it, basically it was an audit of a lot of the other religions and how they viewed creation, and a lot of discussion actually happened about it. And we started in on Christianity, because being the obvious focus for us. Problem is, we completely ran out of time. There was just no way to cover all the source material. I'm going to be honest. I even have so many notes right now. There's no way we can cover all of this. In fact, if somebody wanted to, they could set up a college class just on the. We're not going to be able to get that deep into it, obviously, unless you guys would like to be here for another 8-9 hours. No, okay. Well, be lucky, because YouTube live events, they stop recording after 8 hours. So yeah, we're limited to 8 hours. And for those who haven't seen this before, well, the First Congregation, we're a group of geeks. He's a weirdo, she's a geek, I'm a geek, just all sorts of people that don't necessarily fall within the norms for Christianity and churches and things like that, or just have an interest in religion. Because we do talk about other religions quite frequently, and not in the negative connotation way. Oh, those people, they believe such and such. No, we usually reserve that for Catholics. Sorry. But we're a fairly open group. We are actually at the Center of Wichita here in Wichita, Kansas. Center of Wichita. In fact, you can look it up online at thecenterofwichita.org. Is an LGBT-friendly location that's used for meetings, teen center, all sorts of cool stuff. An LGBT function. Everybody believes if they want to show up and have a good conversation, they show up and have a good conversation. We're all right. So last time we talked about the other religions, and so it has provided us nice artwork. Go ahead and get rid of that now. Marshall.
What?
Oh, I'm just saying somebody gave us some artwork on it.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. There's the obvious, easy, simple school of thought, literalism.
I'm going to go ahead and not say anything.
Why?
Because I know that your wife would totally correct you.
Go ahead and do it.
There's not. Is it litter, as in
spelling it
trash?
like trash on the ground.
There you go.
You didn't know the spelling's not my thing.
Like L-I-T.
That's it.
See, because now it's all spaced out.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
No. Feel free to correct my spelling and or grammar. Well, not the grammar. But the spelling, most certainly. Feel free to
I understand that you don't necessarily feel that this is a great thing, but I don't think you meant it that way.
Right. It was not to trash talk on literalists. No, it was not. Though funny. Literalism, the defense for the Bible is the unerring word of God. Period. It is without flaw. It is without anything else. It is exactly as it appears.
Without context.
Quite often, yes.
Annoying.
Without the cultural context and things like that. You're right.
So basically, if at any point you tell a story where somebody says, you know, it's like if somebody went ahead and had a story where the guy said, okay, it's Tuesday, so we're going to have fish today. That becomes the rule of everything. There will always be fish on Tuesday. And that's the thing that's crazy about it. It's like, well, no, just that Tuesday. But if you take everything literally in it, then it becomes every Tuesday you need fish. Except that was never in the Bible. I'm just using it as an example.
Right, exactly. And the question
like
becomes,
the founding of Israel.
and so literalism would also require one very important fact. If there's no allegories in the Bible, then the Bible itself should not
contradictory.
Should not present anything as an allegory.
Right, but it does.
But it does. In fact, let's throw a
Lots
couple
of things. In fact, Jesus' parables that was why people didn't get them. Oh, sorry.
I'm just gonna throw it out there real quick, and you're okay for the moment, but you're riding real high into some glare. your letters are.
Okay. Where's the glare at?
Down, right there. You'll be under the glare. You'll be under all glare.
Okay.
There's a block. There's like a nice block of glare right there. So.
See, and once again, we're playing with our technology. We have a new camera. In fact, if you notice, it should be just a little bit clearer, a little nicer. It's also got integrated sound on the camera. It's got a set of threads to go on a tripod. It's awesome. Too bad the tripod couldn't be found. I own 2 of them. I've been carrying one back and forth the first Geek. I don't know what happened to it suddenly. So what?
Nothing.
He did not eat it. He didn't. He's just
They'd
making
probably give you a bit of stomachache. A lot of aluminum involved. The other one's a lot of steel involved. So yeah, I think that would give you. Sorry. Let's give me a second. I told you I have a lot of source material here. So give me just a second to scroll through it to find. Since she brought it up, I was actually going to. Jeez.
Sorry.
No, it's just way down in here.
Well, on the plus side, instead of having to page through things, you can just, search for it in its general location. But on the minus side, instead of being able to just flip to a page you can have to go through it with the technology, and it's always kind of new feeling.
Yeah. Allegories in the Bible. Because the Bible supports allegory as part of its telling, as points at directly, then maybe literalism doesn't quite work. So, let's go for this. Let's start with Galatians. If I can write legibly. .421 through 31. Swap back and forth with devices because I have a feeling if I swap pages, I'm going to lose my spot. So we're just going to pull this up. Yeah. Yes, I know you updated. Thank you very much. That's awesome.
Can't like put up 2 screens at once.
So what?
Can't like pull up 2 screens at once.
I haven't updated mine yet to iOS 8. So once I do,
I'm out, but I'll be back in an hour and a half, and there's somebody else who will be back in here too. So
gotcha. So don't
worry
alarm.
about the alarm.
Awesome. Thanks.
I was just imagining you showing them to each other. I know it's not happening.
How you doing?
The paradox just breaks the earth now.
Actually, that'd be kind of cool, because if I could just look at the text over here and go, okay, there we go. That would actually be kind of cool.
I see an app they're making. Except now it's on YouTube, and people are going to steal the idea.
Go ahead, steal that idea. I dare you. I've documented it first. No, nothing matters. Actually, if you think that's a cool idea, do it. Do it. I don't have time for it. Do it. Anyways, Galatians 4, 21 through 31. Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written, Abraham had 2 sons, one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. Those who care, this is NET translation. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise, which things are an allegory? For those are the 2 covenants, one from the Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Agar. For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, for is the mother. Dang it! Let's try this again. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. Jeez, that was hard. For it is written, Rejoice, thou barren, that bearest not, break forth and cry, thou that travelest not, for the desolate hath. Okay, actually, I don't even have to really go on.
Yeah.
Because I can actually scroll back. Point blank. It says, point blank, allegory. It starts off with the idea right there that, yes, the Bible supports allegory. Of course, that's one guy.
Well, Jesus had that talk with Nicodemus, and Nicodemus didn't understand because Jesus was talking about something that wasn't literal. With the born again thing, that's one of my favorite things because it illustrates it right there. Nicodemus, one of the Pharisees, came to visit him at night, even though he believed he was, he was the way to God, even though he believed he had been sent by God. He came at night, which shows that he was still worried about what other people thought because he was Pharisee.
Right.
But Jesus talked to him anyway. And basically, Jesus said that you couldn't see the kingdom of heaven unless you were born again. And Nicodemus took that literally. He thought, you can tell he takes it literally because he sits there and says, how can an old man climb back into his mother, and be born again? I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. It's the same idea. It's kind of gross when you think about it. But that demonstrates that he didn't get the main point, and that was the spirit had to be born again. You couldn't go into it in the same mindset. And I'm gonna stop talking.
No.
Okay.
By the way, is the bar moving enough on her when she's speaking?
Yes.
We hadn't said a sound check back there.
Yes,
Okay,
I had
awesome.
checked. It is. I'm sorry. I was just
It's hard to know if I can hear people out on the second tier back there up on the balcony.
over the organist.
Yeah, way back there.
I just had a mental image of Guardians of the Galaxy on that when Nicodemus was like, "It would not go over my head. I am too fast.
My reflexes are too fast. I would catch them.
I would climb back in my mother."
But the whole born again thing, the whole born again thing, being born of the Spirit and everything, that kind of demonstrates. And there's parts where he says things like, you can't get this because you have to be in the Spirit to get this. So I think it's been kind of, there's several parts in there that if you're looking for whether it's to be taken literally or not, there's definitely not.
There's definitely supporting evidence that not everything is literalism, including just down to Matthew, when writing about Jesus, points to Isaiah as having been an allegory for the coming of Jesus. And of course, Revelations is Revelations. What thing in Revelations is not an allegory or symbolism for something else? Just period.
If you're talking about the future, how can you possibly talk about the future literally when you don't even have the words helicopter yet or anything else? If you're trying to describe something to people in what one, I mean, in Roman times, if you're trying to explain to Roman times the things that exist now,
Good
how
luck.
could you even do it if you didn't have any kind of
Yeah. Good luck.
point of reference?
Absolutely.
With your Star Trek pad there.
Sorry. Woo.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. That now I have the pads from Star Trek Next
Yeah,
Gen.
no, that's cool.
I
'Cause
always find that
I
to
was
be
just
cool.
watching some Star Trek Next Gen just a couple of months ago. I just started rewatching the series, and I just like, even back when it came out and you saw just their touch screens and little pads, you're just blown away. You're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll say at the time, touchscreen technology did exist and things like that. So I could, as a computer guy at the time, it's like, okay, so I could see that happening.
I couldn't
eventually.
because I was like -3, but no, I was like 9, but I wasn't firmly entrenched in the industry.
You're trying to say I'm old, aren't you?
No.
I remember, the
Venerable.
book from Penny, from Inspector Gadget. Penny had this book, and I remember wanting it so bad, and it was basically a computer in a book that you could touch things and move things around.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're about to have all the Dick Tracy watches, Samsung and Apple, and a lot of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be able to make calls from your watch. You will look like an absolute idiot making calls from your watch. Not that people don't find ways of looking like idiots, anyways.
I think they already do. So.
But the defense of literalism basically becomes that it's the unerring word of God, every word of it. There are no errors whatsoever in the Bible. It is all quite factual and quite literal. This is how everything happened. And as we pointed out, okay, so maybe that's not the truth. Maybe there are allegories. It does not actually, by the way, take away from the concept the Bible is unerring.
Yeah, you can have true songs, you can have true poetry, you can have all of these things, but if you interpret it incorrectly, it's not that the truth hasn't been spoken, it's that you have not understood.
Yeah. And I will say, because you brought up poetry and song and etc. as truth. Researching this is, of course, wild stuff because we're talking about the span of 3,500 years of human understanding on one document and how it changes all the time, and the fights that occur over it. One of them I saw, it's actually a fairly modern interpretation that says the Bible is not poetry, except for it was.
Yeah, it totally was.
It was written as epic poetry.
It's got all of the epic catalogs. It's got all the same styles. So if you don't think it's poetry, then you think things are insane.
And at the same time, back then, like many stories from that era, not a whole lot gets preserved, but because it had to be handed down long enough till somebody finally wrote it down, because there was not the idea of writing down stories for a very long time. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
But all of the Bible, all of the Torah, I should say, New Testament is not the same. All of the Torah was sang, and this was how it was handed down person to person.
Oral history.
And it's preserved to this day in Jewish synagogues in that way. If you walk in on any given Friday or Saturday, they're going to be doing the Shema, which is a section out of Leviticus. Shema Yisrael Adonai, da 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 da. And they will do it rote. And I guarantee you, if you've done it 5 or 6 times, you will walk out of there and you'll always remember that song. You'll always be able to remember it. All of Genesis, all of these things were done that way. They were written as epic poetry for a reason. When you start talking about that idea of having been epic poetry, reason why the person in question objected to it was our modern interpretation of things. So if it's poetry, it must just all be symbolism. It can't possibly be true then. Just like I don't use the word creation myth. I use the word term creation myth. I use the term creation stories, because the word myth to us,
Yes.
modern era, has no value whatsoever. So, it's gonna bring that up. Yeah, it was written that way. It was designed that way. It was designed so people could remember it, and keep it going. Checking messages too. So, all right, we got that. So that's one side of it. Now, there's a whole bunch of debates on how this could be an allegory, or just a story, or a highly important story. This is where we're going to get in trouble, because we'll see whether or not how quickly I can rattle through these. And stop me, though, anytime you've got a question or a thought.
It's okay, I don't have a thought in my head.
Yeah.
Believe it.
It's okay.
Kelly.
I have a thought in my head or a hope in my heart.
Oh.
So come on down to the Art
Yeah.
Fashion Flower Factory.
No.
And actually, this literalism gives rise, there's actually a specific term.
Where?
Or something spelled like that. Young Earth interpretation, which is basically the idea the Earth absolutely positively can only be 6,000 years old. Actually, the entire universe can only be 6,000 years old. Actually, less than 6,000 years old, 5,778 or something like that. I can't remember what year we're in right now. I never can remember. We'll come back to this, and we'll come back to this in a little bit, because I do want to circle back around to it, why this is one of the potential reasons why it's a modern day thing that we're so big on.
For a second there, I thought that was D, and I was just like, what's D? Bullet point D.
Bullet point D, day age. A day is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years is as a day. Or a day, and we talked about this last week with the Islamic view of Genesis. You have either 6 or 8 days, depending on who you're talking to, of creation. Those aren't days. Those are segments. So, meaning, for 6 really long times, or 6 arbitrary time periods, or 6 whatever divisions, that's how long it takes to create the universe, to create Earth, man on it, everything else. All these were done in a very, very long time period that we don't necessarily understand. And then it was unimportant for us to understand, because that wasn't the focus point for it. And actually, there's a story, and I don't know if I have it in here, that basically boils down to the reasoning behind this would have been something that happened behind the scenes that we wouldn't have seen, that we didn't see in the Bible. And then God comes to Moses one day and says, as proof of divinity, I am the one who created the light and the dark. Next day he comes to Moses. Actually, I did that backwards, but I'm the one who created the earth and the heavens and the light and the dark. A day later he says, I came and created the waters and separated them. These sort of things. And therefore, Moses wrote it down in an order based on that. There is no evidence that, this is a completely extra biblical thing. There's no evidence to support that. But this idea is one of the common ones. It's actually I kind of semi-hold this idea personally, the day age. I say semi. There's more to it than that. There's also, along with it, is so God creates the light and the dark. He creates the heavens and the earth, and that is a day. Doesn't mean the day was that long. That is a day. Some arbitrary amount of time later, he begins dealing with the surface of the earth, dividing the waters from the land, etc. The time basically boils down to this, is you have a day. And another day. And another day. The time that occurs, not for the days themselves, but the time between them, is an arbitrary amount of time. This could have been 13 billion years for all we know. Or it could have been 24 hours. The idea behind the gap theory is that, and gap theories actually can be applied in a number of other places in the Bible too. But when dealing with Genesis, very particularly, it's about creation and about how you apply those numbers to it. All right, this one's a hard one. I'm gonna have a hard time explaining this one because I don't fully get it myself. Because I don't have, someone put, had I spent more time in college and things like this, I probably would understand it better.
Oh, like there's a lot of stories in literature where there's a frame story, and the frame story is the excuse to tell the other stories. So, like, for example, if you ever had a story that, you know, it was all a dream, or the Arabian Nights one with the framework that the princess is telling the story every night to keep the king from killing her, and it's always a cliffhanger. You know, that's the frame story on the outside, like the I can't think of it. Like the progress ones for the there's there's a really big story in Western culture that I cannot even think of right now, with the knights going on their pilgrimage and the nuns on their pilgrimage, and they all tell a story around the fire. And
Canterbury Tales.
That one, yes, that's one. There's a whole bunch of these stories littered in our history.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's what that means.
For the most part, yes, because it brings it, and it's actually, and the reason why, because you got it pretty well. It's the devil's in the details on this one.
Okay.
Because you're right, that's exactly what they're going for. For instance, why is it 7 days? So that later it can be explained that on this day we rest. That on cycles of 7, every 7 years, every 7 times 7 years, all of these cycles that are based around 7, this becomes the framework for explaining them. That it was God's will because God said, on this day I did this, here, and there I rested. Now, I'm going to jump out of this straight explanation to go to a quick sidebar on this because it's a fascinating idea. Because it actually fits with this, and actually a couple of other interpretations. So you get, so we get to this point, and we're talking about day 7. Well, what happens if days are arbitrary amounts of time? Did God ever quit resting? Is he still at rest? Did he set all this up? And he is at rest. He's still in control. He's still taking care of things, but there is no further creation at the moment. That there could be in the future further creation. That's the idea of a seventh-day rest theory. I can't remember now. I got to see if I can remember the actual name for the theory. Lots of notes, lots of notes. You think I put these on it? Oh.
Won't it be nice when you have a projector?
Sort of.
You still have to sort through notes.
Yeah. Because then
it'll be more work because you also have to arrange slides.
Yeah, because there'll be what I need to have up here and what I need to be. Because I can't put all of these notes up here. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't. My eyes. You know, I read that. I can't make that out. Yeah, no, it would be almost
unholy Venn diagram is this.
Now, however, the thing about stuff like this and the projector and stuff is later on, if we really want to get fancier with it, somebody could be hitting the button and actually, instead of taking a picture, a webcam shot of the board. Thank you. The projected thing. I couldn't. The words were gone. The thing. Also, by a thingist the other night. Instead of a projected thing, you can actually have it set where you switch back and forth the video stream, so that the video stream is either the person here talking live or the actual static shots from the PowerPoint or what have you. Be fantastic because people read this stuff.
And you can
key
some dramatic music if you want to.
Yeah, that's always a possibility.
Musical sting and an animated mouse.
Well, the problem with that is I have to license it. Now, the kicker is since I have game development stuff, there's plenty that I've licensed in. However, a Terminator-esque sort of soundtrack might not be the best.
It would be hilarious, though.
Come with me if you want to understand literary framework interpretation.
I'll be back, said Jesus. That's horrible, sorry.
Well, it kind of is the same message, even though it's just
not a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behave.
Anyway, so there's a possibility if you take a lot of these interpretations. One of the objections is that idea that on the seventh day God rested, and He hasn't quit resting. Some people find that to be offensive. The idea that God is not active right now. Well, there's a difference between active. Hey, you know what? He's sitting in his lounge chair, and every once in a while he goes, "You're on the wrong path. Don't get over there. There we go. Thank you." And I'm not doing creation today. There would be a large difference between the two ideas. 6 days of creation would be an amazing amount of effort, no matter what time period you're talking, compared to the resting state of dealing with us humans.
You created the entire universe. You just need some downtime.
Which also brings a question, though. What happens next week? Think about that a moment.
Well, I mean, there's supposed to be a new heaven and earth.
Yeah. Well, what is that?
That was
and we don't know what that necessarily means.
Yeah, we
so there could be another 7 days of creation, which brings around the idea of, oddly enough, which comes from a number of happens in other religions, which is cyclic universe theory, that we're always just being created and destroyed all the time. So, yeah, who knows? But it's an interesting theory. But that's why some people find these so objectionable. They find that to be a bad idea. There's something they can't handle. The idea that God is
they're not special.
The problem is that whenever we start making the rules for how God is behaving, we miss the point. God tells us, we might not understand, but God told us what He was doing. And just because we don't understand it doesn't mean we can make a whole bunch of new rules.
Yeah.
All right. That was the literary framework with the aside about the eternal seventh day. I'm not going to dive into all the specifics of the literary framework one. Okay, this one's going to require just a little more explanation. Unless anybody gets it just based off the name. Liz has done pretty good about just pointing out what they are based on the name. So I'll depend on you to pull this off this time.
Oh. Of course, this is going to be the time I fail.
The only time you fail is when kryptonite is present.
Oh, behave.
I double checked that one because if she had to also spell check me at the same time, there's a chance she wasn't going to get any of it.
Well, 6-day revelatory interpretation. Revelatory? No. I got nothing on that one. That sounds like they don't think that we've hit the 7th day yet.
God paused. Well, part of the premise is God paused at the end of the 6th day for the benefit of humanity, after revealing all of creation to us. Now, the interesting part, remember that bit that I said where Moses, sitting in the tent, God comes to him and says, Moses, I created the light and the dark. Moses goes, oh, one day God created the light and the dark on the first day. Moses, I separated the waters from the earth. That is how powerful I am and how omniscient I am. Omnipotent I am, omnipotent. Moses says on the 2nd day, God must have done these things. This falls in with that one. That it's basically that the story we have, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, are actually quite arbitrary. That they weren't designed to be written directly in that order, per se. Instead, what it was is God saying, I am the power that created the universe. I am the light and the dark. I am all of these things. I am the one who did this. And Moses is the one that turns this into a narrative. That is the idea of the 6th day revelatory. That's a hard one. Revelatory interpretation. Is that this wasn't supposed to be written quite like this. Wasn't that it was a bad thing that was written like this. It just wasn't necessarily written because God said, I want you to write this right here, this thing exactly like I say, without error, without fault. And oddly enough, this actually, in the mindset of the time period, yeah, I could actually see that one. I don't know that I necessarily buy it, but I can see that in the time period. If God is trying to explain how powerful he is to Moses, more than just, because Moses already bought into it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Moses is already following. But he needs to be able to understand how powerful the being he speaks to truly is.
Well, and also, wasn't he coming from a polytheist society if he was raised as a Pharaoh's child? I mean,
absolutely.
In order for him to understand that God was the one that did all of these things and it wasn't a whole bunch of different gods running around doing it, he would have to, work through that.
Yeah, it was not the god of the Nile that was giving the benefits, and it was not that. It was not the god of the sun that created the light. It was just one person. You're right. That would fall very much within that thinking. It's just a matter of you've got to, explain it. And then Moses later on is going to have to explain it to everybody else. How powerful is this guy?
At that time, with that particular situation, if they were coming out of Egypt as slaves of Egypt, they would be thinking this was how the world worked, and he would have to correct them. And it's interesting to note that the Bible follows other conventions of stories that, like the epic poetry and the things like that. So he would be putting it into a framework where they could actually grasp what was going on.
Yeah. And it makes a decent amount of sense in a lot of ways. I can't say that all these always make sense to me, but that one I think does.
Well, Jesus told parables.
Yes.
There's a lot of times where the biblical language is intended to make people either understand it or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, here we go with ones that I don't quite fully grasp and have not been able to spend enough time in.
Okay.
Divine fiat would just be it is. There's no process per se. It is. Done. Here's the thing. With divine fiat, it's done from a perspective we as humans can't understand. Divine fiat is 6 days of creation from God's point of view, not from the human point of view. We always read this and think from our point of view. What does this look like from God's point of view? What is time? What is all these things? And that's the questions that come to mind with the divine fiat theory, is that if it's done from God's point of view, how long is a day? How relevant is a day? Is it just a segmentation like we talked about up here, or is it actually a day?
Well, the funny thing is we have been in the day of the Lord for, what, 2,000 years?
Yeah.
I mean, and we really obviously are not interpreting that correctly if we think it's one day.
True.
So, yeah, there is some difficulty in trying to interpret this literally when you would then have to say a day has been for more than 2,000 years.
Or it's 2 days. Obviously, it has to be 2 days because in Psalms it says a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years says days. And it's got to be 2,000 years. It's got to be 2 days. That's 2 days. That's what's going to happen.
But it's the day of the Lord. Jesus hasn't come back yet.
I'm pointing out the thinking that a lot of
think.
literalism that goes with a lot of literalism.
Yeah.
So you just blew literalism away.
No, and actually, the thing about literalism that's kind of cool because all of this is just based on faith. This apologetic.
Oh, that word.
That word, yes. Apologetic. And all it really actually means is explaining it.
Yeah.
It's the idea that science or philosophy or any of these number of ologies actually goes with this perfectly well as long as you look at it in this point of view. Literalism is actually the opposite side of the literalist point of view because somebody has to explain these. Typically, I say allegory or symbolic views, but actually, apologetic is the yeah. I keep thinking that word's wrong, but it's not. Covenant does not start with a K.
Yep.
Not today.
Well, I mean, some people have misspelled things on purpose with K's, but that's just crazy.
I'm writing is getting worse as I go along. We write really fast. Kingdom covenant interpretation. Basically, it boils down to the primary reason why we have Genesis 1 and 2 is to show that God, as the overview, essentially, in Genesis 1, we're doing it from God's perspective, and then on Genesis 2, what we're really dealing with is a story told again, but from a human-centric point of view, that we are the most important thing in the story at that point. We are the reason for that tale. And the idea being, Kingdom Covenant being Kingdom of Heaven, covenant with God here on earth. Hey, I'm actually managed to get through some of these things pretty quickly for once. Fortunately, we're almost done with this list, just so everybody knows.
Okay.
This basically boils down to God wasn't concerned about when forming Moses, or actually in general with the universe, wasn't so worried about how it was created. It wasn't really important. What was important is what function all of these things served. For instance, the creation of the sun and the moon. The moon is used continually throughout, particularly Torah, for us to tell the date. When should our celebrations be? The sun is used when the sun goes down. We know it's the beginning of the next day until the sun comes up and goes down again. These are functional items rather than literary devices or anything like that. And so functional interpretation basically boils down to all this about Genesis 1 when it comes to creation. Time scale doesn't matter. What matters is what each one of those represent in a very functional fashion. Am I still good to? Okay. If you ever wonder why I'm doing this, because I don't know where we are at on camera. We don't have one of these big fancy things with a cameraman back there with a little display showing me where I'm at. We're low tech, obviously. This is the fun one. Creation of the garden. Genesis 1 is actually not necessarily about creation of the universe. That's just that's actually kind of a cool story, bro, but it's not what it's about. What it's about is creation of the Garden of Eden. That's the important part. Everything else that leads up to that part is not important. And it's not unimportant, but every story has a beginning.
Yeah, there's always a frame.
So you don't just start one day, and I was walking through the garden. What garden? Well, the garden God created. Wait, God created garden?
Yeah.
Well, yes. So how did he go about creating this garden? All right.
This is how
God created.
Okay, here we go. God
divided the heavens from the earth and created light and called it a day. By the way, that's not the first day; it is a day. And then the importance of the story. This is background to bring us up to speed, so to speak, because especially. Again, this story makes more sense in the time period. In the time period, everybody's Baal, everybody's God, everybody's deities had a creation story. Yep. It was very important. In fact, it was almost utmost important in each one of these things because they set the tone for the rule of these gods. Because you couldn't have a fluffy bunny's god who started out the universe by killing everybody in a previous universe and starting it again. That's not very fluffy bunnies, if you understand what I mean by fluffy bunnies. So it was important to each one of these tales that it had a beginning. So the real beginning is actually Genesis 2. Genesis 1 is just filler. This will get you hanged by a number of people. This is heresy to say this part of the story is thoroughly unimportant. And it's not that it's unimportant. Like I said, it actually is. It's highly important because it sets the tone. But the sheer idea that's not that important, overall perspective, angers some people. Thoroughly angers. In fact, all of these have at least one person out there that they thoroughly piss off, and just no way about it.
Well, people take this stuff too seriously. I mean, I understand. Yes, creation of the universe is an important thing, but it's already here for us.
Yes.
We're in it right now, so it's nice to know that God is in charge of everything and everything.
You're not going to get ahead by decking somebody else who disagrees with you on how it was made.
I agree with you.
People niggle over the tiniest detail, and that's totally not what people should be doing. But
yeah,
I mean, basically, it's really hard when you might wonder if this has further implications, but even Jesus said things like, why are you arguing over how many angels can dance on the head of a pen,
What's the relevance of it? From day-to-day life, for our functional faith, for how we live our lives, is this tale important? 7 days, that's important. We know that one day we're supposed to rest. God created it. Okay, we'll just accept that and we'll move on. Beyond that, really, the interpretation may not be that important. Now, there's a couple of them, like sixth day, which leads into that whole bit about whether or not the seventh day is still happening. Or, as you pointed out, if we're in the day of the Lord, did another day advance? Did somewhere along the line, 2,000 years ago, are we actually on the eighth day? Is it relevant? Or is it just something good to fight over? Because that's the problem. I don't know.
People just fight over it. It's just crazy.
And it stems from that whole idea of two very, very different theological approaches. If somebody tells you that they know the Earth is less than 6,000 years old, what's your response? You automatically put them in a particular box of people.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if somebody asks you, well, what do you believe about creation? And you say, well, I'm kind of in with the divine Fiat interpretation. Start off with, they're going to look at you like you said words they've never heard before, because more likely than not, there's a good chance they've never heard of this term before. But they're going to put you in the box of weirdos, because you got some weird idea about it. If you say that you believe in the idea that, yeah, God created the world, but it probably wasn't actually 6 days. It probably took the 13 billion years that science took. You're not quoting one of these, but you're one of those people. You're one of those people. So people use this as divisionism.
Yeah.
We should.
But they use a lot of things in the Bible as divisionism.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is one of many.
Paul was like, you guys don't need to be quibbling about words.
There are so many things, and despite Paul being a fairly hardliner, and the fact that these were his letters, not scripture per se, we took these as a great example of how we're supposed to run a church, for instance. What attributes do we look for in a candidate to run a ministry? Well, they're not to drink to excess. They're not to be given to anger. They're not to be these attributes. Great idea. This was a letter written to somebody saying who they should be looking for to lead this place. All of them were letters. Now you can go back a little bit and you go into the Gospels. These are supposed to be direct interpretation of what they saw, either first person or handed down to them about Jesus' presence on earth. I'm going to look at this board for a minute because I forgot what my point was. And I'm going to pretend like I'm looking in thought. I forgot I've lost it. Yeah, anyways, there was a number of points behind that, and really, they're all gone. You said something.
Sorry.
I followed it up. No. You didn't mess it up. I thought you had a good point. I followed in with it. It's gone. Dang.
What does it matter?
What about the creation of the universe is important to us?
Yeah, what about it is important? And that we're here is a relatively important issue right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The idea that, for instance,
I think
could be any one of these. Go ahead.
an important point is that it wasn't a whole bunch of gods fighting that created us. We're not accidents. We were literally created on purpose.
Yes, somebody did not
In
trip and fall.
peace.
Yeah.
Or sneeze.
So what?
Or sneeze.
Or sneeze. And by the way, there's another theory here. I'll throw this one out. Piece of heresy. Piece of very large heresy here.
Do it.
In our image.
Huh.
Who does that refer to? In fact, actually, we see this used quite often, and this is important to the creation story. Echad. Echad is me, I, in a plural sense. It is one being. It's a plurality. Now, this works out very well for Judaism, Christianity. Would you just look at it at quick gloss, because Judaism had Yud-Hey Vav-Hey and the Holy Spirit, or the breath of life, or etc. etc. And then with Christianity, you ended up with the Trinity. Jesus as the incarnation of God. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God. Jesus is the Holy Spirit. Jesus is the Son of God. Those all work together. They are echad. They are one thing. They are one being. Important in the creation story, because there's a couple of theories that are completely non-Christian. Is if creation occurred, maybe it wasn't just our God. When speaking in that echad term, it could be any number, but it was all done intentionally. There was a reason why it happened. However, it is very quickly put aside by the use of singulars throughout the rest of creation. But that theory exists. Again, you won't hear that as a Christian theory for obvious reasons, because one, it actually, it kind of downplays a lot of that stuff very quickly. And here's another question. Is Genesis 2 more important than Genesis 1? It's an interesting question, because Genesis 2 is more concerned about our creation.
Yeah.
And how we begin to perpetuate, et cetera, and what we're doing there,
Well,
and why we're there.
One of the other reasons that got me to not read things literal is the fact that they don't line up. They're not the same story. If it was a news story, the facts would have to line up. But because the two stories don't match, I mean, there are details that are different.
There's actually a theory for that one.
Okay.
That creation occurs in Genesis 1. All of creation. Genesis 2 is supposed to be about the creation of man and the creation exclusively of the Garden of Eden. See all that stuff that happens in the second one? That's supposed to one of the theories is that it's just happening there. It's a localized phenomenon. The universe, the creation of the universe, the earth, the heavens, and all of this, that occurs up here. This is the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the smaller, fine-grained picture, which is why part of the things similar actions occur, not necessarily the same order, because they weren't the same importance. Let's see if I can find the name of that, because I actually have it in here See if I've got the name of the theory behind that one. Because I mentioned getting the names of these things written down, so that anybody who goes, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'm curious about that literary framework interpretation. Good luck. I'm sorry that you picked that choice, because it's going to melt your brain a little bit, because there's a lot to it, because it's not just a simple thing. I mentioned the 7 days. We haven't gotten to the kingdom creator, on the creator kingdom creation trinity that occurs there, and all sorts of stuff. I said that I wasn't covering it all, but I want to get them down, so if somebody wants to stop and look further into one of these, there you go. And which brings about why I was looking up. Just wanted to see if I have the name on here. There's oops. That's M-E. Maybe I don't have it on here. I have a blurb about this, but not the actual name of the theory. No, don't have it. Dang. Oh well. Yeah, but it's an interesting theory that there's a lot of holes in this theory though. But on the other hand, if this was the more important part and this was the lesser important part, you know, which part was important in this telling, etc. Which part did God tell Moses? I want you to put the emphasis over here. Don't worry about this part. Worry about this. This is what I find to be important. This is what I want everybody to know about. We don't know those things. So it's a cool theory. Don't know. Obviously, we're not there. Okay. So I'm going to go back up to literalism. My least favorite version of this. Because literalism, I'll admit, there's a certain romance gone with it. The idea of looking in the Bible and finding
Stereo instructions.
So what?
Stereo instructions.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great way of putting it. I like that. Yeah, it's a lot of people view it exactly as that, instructions for life. Okay, well, I'm pretty certain that God didn't give us instructions for how to create a reality. It's kind of unnecessary. We don't have that level of power.
When we speak, things don't spring into existence.
Thankfully.
Oh,
Do you know how much trouble I'd be in on a daily basis?
I'm still kind of sore about that.
So, yeah. There are people who believe that too, by the way. When we speak, we affect
whole new realities.
And I'm not talking about quantum level, each decision, reality trees. No. It's just much more. And there has been, and this, by the way,
yeah.
You brought this up. It's actually kind of interesting because okay. Sorry. Was it you? Okay. It's over here. I don't know what it was. Anyways. You're insane. Literalism, over time, has gotten more extreme.
Yeah.
These Okay, and I put 9 of them here. These are just
Arbitrarily 9, right?
no, specifically 9, very specifically 9, because that was how many the article I originally started with. Because I started with an article that was a good article, it's a good solid article. You can't imagine how much more reading that article caused me to have. Because there must have been, each one of those sections has, here's what it is, and here's what the pros is, and here's what the cons to it is, here's why we think or don't think this is a good idea, a good theological standpoint, here's the links to all of the data that this came from, and all of the writings this is based upon. So there's 9 of them. There's only within an article. Because there's a whole bunch more. And so every once in a while, I keep doing the offshoots over here, like the Garden of Eden versus creation. And so this is fairly functional type stuff. But you actually get you have literalism that gets absolutely and positively concrete, where there is no interpretation anymore. That is it. It's actually, functionally, the Bible, you cannot have a perfectly concrete setting for it.
Basically, in this idea, we should be able to go find Sodom and Gomorrah's smoking remains because there is a fire somewhere that's burning forever. Forever.
Forever.
And so we should be able to locate it by satellite, by a fire that is burning forever in the spot.
See a lot of problems with it.
Okay. Sorry.
And the fires that exist behind Jerusalem never go out, despite the fact the trash bin has not been used in ages. There's a lot of it. On the other hand, you get the other direction with it. I'm going to call those fluffy bunnies because I don't have a good term. Because in the middle, I'm going to say this is actually the middle ground. This is, I'm not calling anybody nutcases. This is what I consider to be the sane, solid middle ground to stand upon. If you get too concrete, you can no longer stand upon it. If you get too fluffy bunnies,
you can't stand on it either. It's ethereal.
Yes. And so this whole thing, and part of it is that some of it is the pollution that we get from modern society.
Yeah. That big argument with religion versus science kind of really threw us in a loop because in order for in order for religion to deal with that, they decided that every single thing had to be concrete. Oh, this is factual. We'll go find this giants from the Bible over here, and then they had like archaeologists and things that fooled people with fake giants.
Yes.
Just so that they could say, hey, this is a factual thing.
Well, and you can trace a lot of it back to Calvinism to start with. Calvin was, it's not that the idea of literalism didn't exist prior to Calvin. Far from it. Every possible...
Well, we saw it in Nicodemus. I mean, in that story, you can see it.
Yes.
It's not like it's a new thing, but...
In the Americas, though, because we're actually...
We made it a cult, though.
We are actually the most concrete of the groups there are at the moment. We have more literalism for us than anybody else. The guy's name is it's 1902 George. He's a Canadian. And this guy, okay, and I don't mean to speak ill of people, but this guy was kind of a jerk. Let me explain why he was a jerk. See, he explained why that it was impossible for the Earth to be more than 6,000 years old. See, he was a geologist and a biologist. Oh, but all he had was a high school degree. In fact, actually, he considered college to have been determined to his detriment had he taken college, because he would not know these things properly, because God spoke to him directly and said those 6 days are real and absolute and concrete. He began campaigning to churches the idea that these are absolute, that these are literal. So yeah, and I gotta find the name. Greg Price or George Price.
If we go to school, it'll pollute our minds because we won't be able to think right.
George McCready Price. There we go. Oh, here I'll just I'll read. Oh man, I gave him too much credit. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Oh man. You gave him too much credit. That's really.
No, you're gonna see why I say this.
And his name's Price, so it's like a double joke.
George McCready Price, a Seventh-day Adventist and a self-described geologist, had nothing beyond an elementary school level education in the sciences.
Self-described. Lovely.
Right. And you notice I said high school.
Yeah.
Elementary.
Okay. Well,
however, historian Ronald Numbers points out that Price considered it to be a virtue that he had never been infected with the disease of university-itis.
Oh, God.
Undaunted and believing that God had called upon him to uphold the true biblical view of creation, Price began researching and writing on science-related issues in the 1900s. So
now, I don't have a problem so much with the idea that he wasn't terribly educated, since a lot of people weren't. But the idea that he's just simply not willing to listen to other people, and that he's completely just self-described as a geologist.
And there's
I have difficulty with that.
Yeah, and there's of course we are missing a time frame issue here. We're just coming out of the time frame at 1800s, just where the idea of the self-created scientist existed. A lot of the guys that we know and are famous in our minds were not necessarily college educated in, say, for instance, physics. It didn't really exist as a field too much, and there was not that many places to learn from it. So you're right. On the other hand, so it was not uncommon to hear of a person like this. It was also not uncommon to hear of somebody actively campaigning their point of view. Even to the point that peer review, the concept of peer review, hey, I wrote a cool paper, you're in the same field as me, would you take a look at this and figure out whether or not I'm right? Oh, I'm not? Ooh, bad. That's what we do in modern day, peer review. It's actually
and probably why. Probably why we do it in modern day.
Fairly modern concept. It really is. These guys existed, and they campaigned for their ideas. And sometimes some of them were kind of odd characters, like Lord Kelvin. Lord Kelvin, the reason why we have a temperature scale, Kelvin. Lord Kelvin maintained the Earth could not have been more than 65,000 years old, to the point when somebody presented him evidence to the contrary. Lord Kelvin was in a fairly high-ranking spot in the scientific community. He blew the guy down and said, no, it can't be. This is my theory. Your theory sucks. And really, that was his proof, was your theory sucks, mine's better, but without anything to build upon. This is what Price did with all of science. Your theory sucks, mine has a book. And then convince people, because if you're creative enough, and if you're charismatic enough, you can convince a lot of people a lot of stuff pretty easily. There's a whole lot of history. We won't have to go into names of history, but there's a whole lot of people that happened around. And this was yet another guy. Well, he becomes the functional outlet for those who had kind of been on the, yeah, maybe you're right, it's literally, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Now they've got somebody they can rally behind. Boom, this Canadian comes in and is writing about science without knowing science, is writing about Scripture because God has told him to write about Scripture, as this is his quest. And this becomes, in a way, some of the basis for why some Canuck managed to influence U.S. churches enough that...
Did he have a good life? Did he do anything?
I have no idea, because you know what the one thing he's famous for?
That.
This.
Yeah.
So, and it's a horrible thing to say. I would almost like to have heard that he said also went out and helped orphanages. That'd be awesome,
Mm-hmm.
But the only story you get to hear of this guy is this. And so, I don't know. I don't really know. And also, I had not thought about it. Maybe I should have the Wikipedia entry for him.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is when there's all these theories and things, you can go back and you can look at what people did. I mean, if it's been recorded, and I mean we're here, they're there, so we don't have everything, but usually significant events in their lives are recorded. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see how they actually acted, because if they were running around saving orphanages and things, I'd be more inclined to at least listen to the idea that they might have had some kind of personal relation with God.
Yeah.
But if the only thing they're known for is messing up the way people interpret things, then I'm not as likely to listen to it.
I can understand your point of view.
But a lot of the people that have changed religious theories have done things like set other people on fire and made it green wood so they burn longer, and done really not religious things.
There is a lot of people who have done a lot of horrible things in the name of God. Not even just our God. And other gods. I mean, just, yes. Oh, yeah. Then sometimes you have to be careful to look to see where some of these theories come from, because some did come from people like that. But,
yeah. So it can be pretty tricky, But yeah, the idea that it can be taken literally, I can't even connect that. I cannot take it literally because I look at the two stories and they don't match up.
Yeah. And then also, for instance, if you look at the laws in the Torah are both, to a degree, concrete. This is what you're supposed to do. But also, they are the model for what you're supposed to do in other situations. For instance, if you come upon a hole in the ground and your neighbor's ass is full of donkey, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The donkey, the old one. Yeah.
You two are laughing, and I'm...
Clearly you're distracted.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Looking up stuff on the ground.
Okay. If you find anything interesting, holler. So if you see that the neighbor's ass has fallen in the hole, you are supposed to help it out.
Yeah.
So if you've come across and the neighbor's sheep is in the hole, obviously you don't do it.
No.
If their chickens are in the hole, you don't do anything. If their daughter is in the hole, you don't do anything. Because there's no rule about those. That's what happens with literalism.
Yeah.
There's no rule about that.
And even like Paul had an expression when he was pulling out a phrase from where you're supposed to not muzzle the was it donkey or ox that's trampling the grain. I think it might have been ox because that's bigger, but I don't remember. But he was like, do you think it's referring to the ox or donkey? Do you think that this is for that?
For a specific thing? Or is it examples of how we're being?
Taking care of whoever does the work.
Yes. Yeah, because the idea, in particular, it was actually the ox is helping to plow the fields or tear it down, because if there's food there, the ox is going to eat it as it's plowing. The idea of muzzling it, save some grain. So yes, it's exactly what it was after. Yes, whoever does the work should also be compensated for it. Should be able to be taken care of properly.
We need that in modern day. You need to remember.
I wasn't able to find anything. I was able to find Buy Creation Theory at a Great Price.
I'm not buying into it at any price. So yeah.
Sorry. Oh, our modern world.
Yeah. Okay. We have one thing that we're going to get into real quick, specifically for one person. The word yom.
Okay.
So, give me just a second here.
I remember asking him for
Do I want you to close off? No, I don't want to close off that.
No, not about it.
Hey, look, an eraser. Anyways. So,
It's a functional eraser.
is that a literary framework eraser?
Yeah.
That kind of is.
Well, that's where to erase the literary framework.
How'd that go, our viewers?
So we've talked about a lot of these theories, and the care is to each one of these sets of theories, there's a whole lot of bullet points involved with why if one person or another created or believed this one to be true. And like I said, like the literary framework interpretation, it's a very long one. There's a lot to work with. As a matter of fact, it extends so far into the Bible. It's wow.
Well, people have been writing theories about this for 2,000 years.
No.
Not the entire time, but it wasn't widely available to everybody, but there were monks making notes as it's been recorded and re-recorded and re-recorded, because you had to do that, otherwise it would have decayed with age.
Yes.
But they've been making notes and more notes and more notes and more theories over time.
Absolutely.
But we could literally sit here and argue things forever on it. Or we could go ahead and do what we think is right from what we understand.
Yes. And yeah.
There's some criticisms for people that are always trying to learn but not actually learning anything in the Bible.
'Tis true. 'Tis true.
Just think if we'd used all of that and, to do things that we were told to do, to like heal the sick and take care of people and feed people and clothe people. But no, we've got to argue and troll each other.
Well, and
sorry.
we put the emphasis and the importance on worldly things a lot of times, instead of the behaviors. It's how much good could be done with the money spent? This is a long argument. How much could be spent? How much good could be done spending the money for multi-million-dollar complexes that serve a community, a church community, versus how much can be spent helping the homeless by building them shelters instead? There's always back and forths on where we could do a lot more good. And it's an unfortunate thing. We spend a lot of time, as you point out, fighting about stuff. In fact, even theoretically, we're having this long discussion. We've been out there for 2 hours helping the homeless or serving at the Lord's Diner. Would have been time better spent? I don't know. I really can't answer that, especially because now we're in a weird spot. We're in a weirder spot than a lot of churches are, a lot of groups are. And the fact that we have the nebulous group out here, we don't know how many people watch it. Well, actually, I do know how many people watch it during the week. So a discussion that we have in here, even if we get into it, if Marshall disagrees with us, let's say Marshall says, seriously, 6-day revelatory interpretation? You guys believe this stuff? his being here and having that conversation could help somebody on the other end make up their mind. So, you talk about the trolling and the fighting, and we could do much more good. I agree with you, but it's also hard to tell when does that trolling and that fighting maybe do something good for somebody else who's observing the conversation. It is so impossible to tell. I don't know. I'm not trying to support the idea. I'm not trying to support the idea of going out and making a lot of fights.
Yeah.
Just to be aware. However,
Imagining the big troll thing.
anyways, but I'm not advocating it. But I am saying that maybe sometimes these conversations do have a good reason. That the disagreements and the fights that occur, maybe they happen for a reason, and maybe they help others actually find some focus to go out and do something. I'm hoping, I pray that is the case. I don't know that it is. But I hope that's the case sometimes. Yom. The reason why Yom is important is
Because it keeps getting away. Fast.
fast. Anyways.
Well, they got their own sound effect. Yom. Sorry.
And a head spell.
Yum, yum, yum.
See, because Yom suddenly becomes very, very, very important to the reading of any of these. Yom
Does it
means
mean
day.
day? Okay. But does it only mean day?
Well, that's the thing about it. Depends on who you ask. My Hebrew writing is horrible, so just forgive me.
Well, I can't correct your spelling on that one. I got no clue.
Well, I can. Come on, bring it on.
I can sort of do it, but not very well. Yom, day. Day actually does have multiple meanings. Modern day. Let's put the English in there.
Well, I mean, even when we say it modern day, we're not actually meaning the day.
Yeah.
Today, we mean this. But yeah, sorry.
No. That's actually, and that's part of the problem is that even back then, today we have 34, I believe, interpretations of what day can mean. I believe that's the number. I had that research for last week, and I didn't get to use it. I think it's like 34 interpretations for what day can mean. Fortunately, back then, they were a much simpler language. Sort of. Words got used multiple times in different contexts, but oddly enough, it was a little more focused at times. We have, because of all the languages existing, we kind of cross-pollinate languages, so the meanings and the regional meanings and things like that become a big issue. Mm-hmm. So, for framework, Yom is important because it just sets the frames of it. For each day, I'm not going to get into this deeply. Each day is actually just used as a divider. Mm-hmm. And the first 3 days are used to determine certain portions of general creation, for lack of a better term. And days 4 through 6 are the kingdom of God itself, the plants, the animals, the people, all of these things, the living, breathing portion of it. And then 7th day is the Creator taking his rest. So there's one interpretation of Yom. completely and utterly unlike anything that we deal with for Patty. Completely and utterly unlike anything we deal with for our normal speech patterns. We don't normally say day as a divider for such a high set of concepts. Okay. Well, for gap theory, Yom becomes an abstract. Yom becomes translated as an abstract. Same with day age, which just becomes another segmentation. However, even though this is an absolute day, in gap theory it's an absolute day, that happened that day. There may be a whole lot of time between each one. While this one is, it happened in this time period that we call a day. Now here's the thing. This is, and the person in question, the reason why I'm bringing this one up, had asked, what about Yom? It means a day. And very solidly with the day thinking. The problem is, all of these exist not because, this is important, all of these exist not because of English. All these neat little interpretations are not singularly from English. All these interpretations are from smarter people who use the Hebrew. See, I'm not smart enough to go through the Hebrew all the time. I can pick out a word here and there. I can really crudely write a word even. Really crudely. But it doesn't mean I know it well enough to take this on. The problem with playing the game based around the original Hebrew, you have to know the original Hebrew that well before you can actually discuss it in that format. So I had said I would go over Yom. The problem is that I, in a way, already have. Each one of these that we talked about here, those were based off of the idea of that original statement. A day, a segment, a time, could have all been translated for every one of these. So I wanted to point that out, though, that these were not, even in English, it's not an absolute in English. That word is not an absolute. Day is not an absolute in English, nor is day an absolute in the original Hebrew, as far as I know. And there's examples in. No, I'm not going to search for them. It's too late. Sorry, checking time to see if I had time to. I don't think I quite do. Before we break down for the next group. But there's examples in the Bible, though, where day is used as a segment. Day is also used as an absolute for 24 hours. Matter of fact, if you're following the calendar, you're dealing with it in absolutes. It is from when the sun has gone down, the sun comes up and goes down again. That is a day. And it's actually very specific. We think of day as when the sun came up to when the sun goes down, or from when the sun comes up till it comes up again.
Changed our way of thinking of it.
Yeah, you know, a lot of that happens over time. Other influences, and does it matter? Not really. From a functional standpoint, for our society, it doesn't necessarily matter.
It's kind of funny because right now we think of it as the second. We don't even use the sun.
Mm-hmm.
We look at the clock. We're like, 12:01. It's the next day.
Yeah, it's actually kind of fascinating sometimes to look at it from the biblical standpoint, mm-hmm. and also to realize they also had the concept of using it as divisions also existed for timing too. So there's not an absolute for this translation. It is as flawed as our language is with the word day. Some day does not mean 24 hours.
Yeah.
Some day just means one of these days.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in the future. That is not an absolute. That is not 24 hours. Same applies here. So, all right. I think we're going to wrap it up because whoever the next group is going to...
we don't start until 4:30. We may have some trickling in, but...
Okay. Okay.
get in for a minute if I'm not totally interrupting.
You're totally interrupting because you came in at the end, not the beginning. I mean, really, making you feel uncomfortable. Anyways, well, I kind of got this to the end point anyways, I think. There's more notes I could beat people with here. For the next 2 hours, I could recall, because we haven't gotten to Genesis 2, really. This is just, the only thing that got mentioned was that the two theories that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, with the association between the two of them was. So, and there's no way I'm going to fit that set of source material.
Yeah.
However, this does not mean there's going to be a part 3 next week. There is not. 2 weeks of this one topic is good enough for me.
That's what I was looking, I was like, wasn't it supposed to be Genesis 2?
No, it's just part 2.
Part.
Just the second part of this discussion. We got into what all the different major, well, not even major religions, various religions, how they viewed creation. Because the most important point behind all this, if you're not a literalist, the most important part, if you're a literalist, is that this is exactly right. The important part, if you're a non-literalist, if you look at it as an allegory, is that this holds many truths for us to look at. The power of God. The idea that we are supposed to rest and relax on the seventh day. That exists. That's a pretty good example there for us. There's other things in there that we can deep look into and find meaning for ourselves. It doesn't have to be literalism for us to find that meaning. The same actually applies to a lot of other religions. A lot of other religions look at it. Yes, this is the story of creation. I don't think we were really built from mud, but this is the story of creation. And because of the association with, for instance, the vulture. No, it wasn't the vulture. It was the beaver. It's a Native American one. Because of the association with the beaver, we understand that we were created because of this. So all these things have meaning, regardless of whether or not they're absolutes. And that's the important part, I think. I just hear it so often these days that it's an important topic to me. I suppose this is what happens. It's an important topic to me, so I'm going to talk about it. Which brings about the thing. Next week, I don't have anything planned yet. The week after, I'm actually going to be out because of Great Plains Renaissance Festival. I do the Kansas Sausage Pavilion, so I will not be here. Nobody will be here. Don't show up in 2 weeks. Next week, we will be here. Do you guys have a vote for a topic? Give me something cool. Marshall, you're weird. Give me something cool.
I got nothing.
Or I can make something up. Let's be honest, that could happen too. If you guys,
I got nothing. How about the fact that Jonah couldn't physically fit inside of a whale's stomach?
why couldn't he? Why couldn't he?
Well, I'm sorry, go down a whale's throat.
Why couldn't he?
As well, so it's a tiny.
Yeah, but if God threw the whale at him.
Wedge it in there. We're talking
How
whale
about-
CPR.
Divisions.
What?
Divisions in the church.
Divisions in the church. Divisionism or divisions? I know that sounds like divisionism is the process of creating more divisions, something we're not supposed to necessarily do.
Yeah.
Or divisions is the different types of thinking that exist already.
The second one.
Okay.
Let's go with the second.
All right.
I just found out some other day that there was besides the Eastern Orthodox, there was like Coptic Christians in Egypt,
Yes.
and that apparently the division with Nicaea, whatever, so basically had a big spat between them and the other Roman group. And that they had some sort of doctrinal problem with the Trinity that eventually they got around to not arguing about it later. But it was, apparently that's where we got monasticism, was that the Coptic group had, they would have people that went out and lived in the desert. And they just started getting more people, and so it's kind of an interesting thing, but I don't know that I'm not missing a whole bunch of stuff just because I didn't grow up going to church and know what all the different
There's
groups are.
an amazing, and especially, okay, there's a huge diversity here in the United States, and we tend to think, because we're Americans, we tend to think about the entire world based on our point of view.
Yeah.
Which leaves us out of so many wild things that have occurred. Because most of the real action that occurred
Was pre
was pre-us over the other side of the ocean. When we came over here, there was already quite a few doctrines set. That, as a matter of fact, I mentioned the literalism and Price, but the foundations were actually set a little bit before then with the Pilgrims, who were fairly staunch literalists. So there's a whole lot of stuff. Okay, yes, I will do this. I will do this. I will do this one because this is fun. This is a history lesson for me with a whole lot of questions that can be asked. I'll see how I can break this down into a reasonable time frame now. Okay, because the division of Christianity is only two people who went this way when everybody else went this way. So sometimes there's some really small groups with some interesting ideas that this group died out, but another group popped up and co-opted part of their ideas later. Then there's some groups that popped up. Take, for instance, the Shakers. There's the Quakers. Everybody's heard of the Quakers, right? Anybody heard of the Shakers?
I've heard of them, but I think they died out because they didn't breed.
Bingo! That's the problem right there. They did not believe in reproduction. So that group, gone. And that happens from time to time. So there's a whole lot of branches in here that are kind of interesting. So yes, we'll do divisions. And this will be fun. So anyways, for anybody who's watching out there, bye-bye. Have fun. Look up all the stuff that I talked about because there's really lots of neat stuff out there on those various sections that I could not possibly have hit. If I spent a week on each one of those of those 9 schools of thought of creationism, we still wouldn't have gotten it all covered. So have fun, do a little reading on your own, and hit me up on Facebook or Twitter with any of your questions you got later on. So catch you later. Bye.